Their food arrived and they ate while continuing to talk. The conversation flowed naturally, moving from topic to topic without any awkward pauses. Keanu found himself genuinely relaxed in a way he hadn't been in a long time. Rebecca was easy to talk to, funny without trying too hard, and genuinely interested in what he had to say rather than just waiting for her turn to speak. "Can I ask you something?" Keanu said as he finished his burger. "And you can totally say no if it's too forward. Go ahead, could I get your number? I'd like to stay in touch if that's okay with you." Rebecca set down her fork looking surprised. "Really, you want my number?" "Yeah. I don't have a lot of friends who I can just talk to normally. Most of my relationships are complicated by work or fame or history. But talking with you today has been good. Really good. And I'd like to keep talking if you're interested." "Of course I'm interested. But Keanu, I'm just a regular person. I design logos and watch Netflix and hang out with my demon cat. Are you sure you want to be friends with someone that boring?" "You're not boring." "And yeah, I'm sure." He pulled out his phone. "What's your number?" She told him, and he typed it into his contacts. Then he called her number so she'd have his. "There," he said. "Now we're officially connected." Rebecca looked at her phone like it might explode. "I have Keanu Reeves' phone number. This is the weirdest day of my entire life. In a good way, I hope. In the best way." She glanced at the time on her phone and her expression fell. "Oh man, my flight board's in 20 minutes. I should probably get back to my gate." "Right, of course." Keanu signaled for the check, but when it came, he insisted on paying. Rebecca protested, but he waved her off. "I invited you to dinner. I'm paying." They walked back through the terminal together, Dave still following at a respectful distance. The conversation had gotten quieter now, both of them aware that their time together was ending. When they got back to gate 37, there were already people lining up to board. Rebecca's boarding group hadn't been called yet, but it would be soon. They stood facing each other near the windows. The afternoon sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the terminal floor. "Thank you," Keanu said, "for talking with me, for listening, for being so understanding about the whole thing with Jennifer. Thank you for coming over in the first place, and for dinner, and for, being a genuinely good person." She smiled. "I think you're even nicer than your public reputation, and that's saying something." "I try." He hesitated, then said, "I meant what I said about staying in touch. If you want to text or call sometime, please do. I know I'm busy, but I'll answer when I can." "I will, and same goes for you. If you're ever in Portland, let me know. I'll show you all the best coffee shops." "Deal." The gate agent called Rebecca's boarding group. She picked up her bag and slung it over her shoulder. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then, surprising himself, Keanu stepped forward and gave her a hug. It was brief but genuine, and when they pulled apart, Rebecca had tears in her eyes. "Sorry," she said, wiping at them quickly. "I'm not usually this emotional. Today has just been a lot. I know what you mean. Okay, I really have to go now." She started backing toward the line, not quite willing to turn away yet. "I'll text you when I land?" "Please do." "Okay. Bye, Keanu. Thank you for everything." "Safe flight, Rebecca." She gave him one last wave, then turned and joined the line of passengers boarding the plane. Keanu watched until she disappeared down the jetway. Then he stood there a moment longer, watching the plane through the window even though he couldn't see her anymore. Dave approached quietly. "You good, boss?" "Yeah," Keanu said. "Yeah, I'm good. Let's go home." They walked back through the terminal toward the exit. Keanu felt different than he had when he'd arrived a few hours ago. Lighter somehow. Like something heavy he'd been carrying had shifted position, become more manageable. He thought about Jennifer as Dave drove him home through the evening traffic. But the thoughts didn't hurt the way they usually did. Instead, he found himself thinking about what Rebecca had said about her grandmother's story. About walking through the garden, choosing between protecting everything or experiencing everything. For 24 years, he'd been walking carefully, trying not to crush any more flowers. Maybe it was time to walk freely again. Over the next few weeks, Keanu and Rebecca texted regularly. Nothing intense, just small updates about their days. She sent him pictures of Princess Buttercup doing ridiculous things. He sent her photos from whatever set he was working on when he was allowed to. They talked about movies and books and random thoughts that popped into their heads. About a month after their airport meeting, Keanu found himself in Northern California for a few days of location scouting. Portland was only a few hours away by plane. On impulse, he texted Rebecca, "I'm in San Francisco for work. Any chance you'd want to grab coffee this weekend?" "I could fly up to Portland." Her response came quickly. "Are you serious?" "Yes." Absolutely yes. That Saturday, Keanu flew to Portland on a commercial flight, baseball cap pulled low, trying to blend in. Rebecca met him at the airport, and seeing her again felt surprisingly natural, like meeting up with an old friend rather than someone he'd only spent a few hours with. She took him to her favorite coffee shop, a tiny place in a residential neighborhood that served excellent coffee and better pastries. They sat in a corner booth and talked for 2 hours, picking up conversations they'd started over text and exploring new ones. "This is nice," Rebecca said at one point. "I was worried it might be weird seeing each other again. But it's not." "I had the same worry," Keanu admitted. "But you're right. It's not weird at all." They walked through her neighborhood after coffee, Rebecca pointing out landmarks that mattered to her. The park where she went running, the bookstore she loved, the Thai restaurant that made the best curry she'd ever tasted. "I should probably warn you," she said as they walked. "People are going to start recognizing you soon. We've been lucky so far, but it's going to happen." "I know. It always does eventually." "Does it bother you?" "Sometimes. But not as much as it used to. You learn to accept it as part of the package." They stopped at a small park and sat on a bench overlooking a pond. Ducks paddled around and a couple of kids threw bread to them even though there were signs saying not to. "I did something after we met," Rebecca said. "I hope you don't mind. What's that?" "I looked up Jennifer. Not in a creepy stalker way. Just I wanted to know more about her. About what you lost." Keanu was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "And?" "She was beautiful. And she seemed really talented. The things people said about her, the work she did, I could see why you loved her. Thank you for saying that. I also read about Ava, your daughter. I can't even imagine what that must have been like. It was the worst thing I've ever been through, still is. Some days I think about her, about what she would have been like, and it still takes my breath away." Rebecca reached over and took his hand. It was a simple gesture, but it felt significant. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. Both of those losses. It's not fair. No, it's not. But life isn't fair. That's what I've learned. Terrible things happen to good people, and we just have to find a way to keep going." They sat in silence for a while, watching the ducks, holding hands. "It felt comfortable, right? Can I tell you something?" Keanu said eventually. "Always. When I first saw you at the airport, I thought I was seeing a ghost, or maybe losing my mind. But now, getting to know you as yourself, not as someone who reminds me of Jennifer, I'm glad it happened. I'm glad I walked over and talked to you." "Me too. Even though you looked terrifying when you were approaching. I thought you might be having a medical emergency." He laughed. "I kind of was. An emotional one anyway. Well, I'm glad you survived it. And I'm really glad you asked for my number." Over the next few months, their friendship deepened. Keanu visited Portland when he could. Rebecca flew down to LA a few times. They talked on the phone late at night when Keanu was on location somewhere, trading stories and jokes and comfortable silences. People started noticing. Paparazzi got photos of them having coffee together, walking through parks. Gossip sites speculated about whether they were dating. Keanu's publicist asked if he wanted to release a statement. He said no. Whatever was happening between them didn't need to be defined or explained to strangers. One evening, about 6 months after they'd met, Keanu drove out to the cemetery where Jennifer was buried. He hadn't been in a while, and he felt like he needed to make this visit. He sat on the grass next to her headstone and talked to her the way he used to. He told her about Rebecca, about how they'd met, about how much her friendship meant to him. He told her he felt guilty sometimes, happy with someone new. He asked if that was okay. The wind rustled through the trees, and Keanu took that as the answer he needed. Jennifer would want him to be happy. She'd never wanted him to spend his life alone, locked in grief. She'd been too full of life herself to wish that for anyone, especially someone she'd loved. "I'll never forget you," he said aloud. "You and Ava, you're part of me forever. But I think maybe it's time I stopped walking so carefully through the garden. I think maybe it's time I let myself really live again." He sat there a while longer, feeling the late afternoon sun on his face, thinking about everything that had happened in the past 24 years. All the pain, yes, but also all the good things. The work he loved, the friends he'd made, the lives he'd touched through his foundation work, and now Rebecca. This unexpected gift that had walked into his life looking like his past but pointing toward his future. When Keanu got back to his house that evening, he called Rebecca. "Hey," she answered. "How are you?" "Good, really good actually. I did something today." "What's that?" "I visited Jennifer's grave. I told her about you." There was a pause on the other end. "And how did that feel?" "Scary at first, but then good." "Right. Like I was finally giving myself permission to move forward." "That's huge, Keanu. I'm proud of you." "Listen, I have to go to Toronto next month for a film. It's going to be about 3 weeks of shooting. Would you want to come with me? Stay for a while. We could explore the city together when I'm not working." Another pause, longer this time. Then Rebecca said, "Are you asking me to come as a friend or as something more?" Keanu smiled. "I'm asking you to come as someone who's become really important to me. Someone I want to spend more time with. We can figure out the rest as we go." "Then yes. Absolutely yes. I'd love to come to Toronto with you." They talked for another hour, making plans, discussing logistics, simply enjoying each other's voices. When they finally hung up, Keanu sat in his living room with a feeling he hadn't experienced in decades. Hope. He thought about that afternoon in the airport, seeing Rebecca for the first time and thinking he was seeing a ghost. It had felt like the universe playing a cruel trick on him. But maybe it wasn't cruel at all. Maybe it was the universe giving him a second chance at something he thought he'd lost forever. Not a replacement for what he'd had with Jennifer. That was impossible and he'd never won it. But something new. Something worth walking freely through the garden for, even if it meant risking getting hurt again. Keanu looked at the picture of Jennifer he kept on his bookshelf. Young, beautiful, full of life. He smiled at it. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything we had, and for leading me to where I am now." Then he picked up his phone and texted Rebecca, "Can't wait for Toronto. This is going to be great." Her response came immediately. "It really is. See you soon, Keanu." He set his phone down and looked out the window at the Los Angeles night. Somewhere out there, life was continuing. People were loving and losing, starting over and holding on. The world kept spinning, hearts kept beating, and maybe, just maybe, second chances were real. Keanu closed his eyes and, for the first time in years, let himself imagine a future that included not just work and solitude, but connection and joy and someone to share it all with. It felt good. It felt like coming home. "You might be right," Keanu said quietly. "I don't talk about her much anymore. Not because I've forgotten or because it doesn't matter. But people move on. They expect you to move on too. After a while, bringing up someone you lost 24 years ago feels like living in the past." Rebecca shifted in her seat to face him more directly. "But you're not living in the past just because you still think about her. She was a huge part of your life. That doesn't just disappear because time passes." "Exactly." He felt a wave of gratitude toward this stranger who somehow understood. "Most people don't get that." "My mom remarried 5 years after my dad died," Rebecca said. "And her new husband, Tom, he's a good guy. I like him. But for a long time I felt guilty even mentioning my dad around them, like I was being disrespectful to Tom or making my mom sad by bringing up the past. It took me years to realize that was stupid. My dad existed. He mattered. Pretending otherwise doesn't honor anyone." "How'd you figure that out?" "Therapy mostly," she said with a laugh. "Lots of therapy. My therapist kept asking me why I thought I needed permission to remember my own father. Eventually it clicked. I didn't need permission. He was my dad. I get to talk about him whenever I want." "That's a good therapist," Keanu said. "The best. She saved my life, honestly. Well, not literally, but pretty close." Rebecca picked up her coffee again, realized it was empty and set it back down. "What about you? Do you see anyone?" "A therapist, I mean. I did for a while. After Jennifer died. It helped, getting some of the darkness out, talking to someone who wasn't going to judge or try to fix everything." He stretched his legs out in front of him. "I should probably go back. It's been a few years." "It's never too late," she said. "That's what my therapist always says. People think there's some window where you're supposed to deal with trauma, and after that you just have to live with it. But that's not how it works. You can start healing at any time." They sat quietly for a minute, watching people pass by. An older couple walked slowly past, holding hands. A businessman rushed by with his phone pressed to his ear, looking stressed. A family with 3 kids struggled with their luggage and a stroller. "Can I ask you something personal?" Rebecca said. "After everything we've already talked about, I think we're past the point of worrying about what's too personal." She smiled. "True. Okay, so, have you dated anyone seriously since Jennifer? Or is that way too intrusive?" "No, it's okay." Keanu thought about how to answer. "I've dated. Nothing that lasted. Part of it is my work. I'm traveling constantly, doing movies in different countries. That's hard on relationships. But part of it is me. I think I've been afraid to really let anyone in again. Because it hurt too much the first time? Yeah. When Jennifer died and our daughter before that, it felt like my whole world collapsed. I didn't think I'd survive it. And I guess part of me decided that the best way to never feel that pain again was to not love anyone that deeply again." "That's lonely, though," Rebecca said gently. "It is," he admitted. "Really lonely sometimes, but loneliness feels safer than devastation." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was soft. "My dad used to tell me this story. He grew up in Taiwan, and his grandmother had this saying. She'd say that life is like walking through a garden. You can walk through it very carefully, stepping around all the flowers so you never crush them, never risk damaging anything beautiful. Or you can walk freely, knowing that sometimes you'll step on flowers and they'll die, but you'll also see more beauty, smell more roses, feel more alive. The choice is whether you want to protect everything or experience everything." "That's beautiful," Keanu said. "Your dad sounds like he was a wise man." "He was. God, I miss him." She wiped quickly at her eyes. "Sorry, I didn't mean to make this about me." "Hey, no. It's fine. We're sharing here. That's what this conversation is." He reached over and gently touched her arm. "Thank you for telling me about him." She smiled, still a bit teary. "You know what's funny? I came to LA this weekend to interview for a design job with a tech company. It would have been a big move, more money, more prestige. And I totally bombed the interview. Like spectacularly bombed it. I was so nervous I could barely string sentences together. I'm sorry. That's rough. The thing is, I was beating myself up about it all morning, thinking about what I should have said, how I messed up my big chance. But now sitting here talking with you, I'm thinking maybe it happened for a reason. If that interview had gone well, I would have left yesterday. I wouldn't be sitting in this airport right now. I wouldn't have met you. So you do believe things happen for a reason?" Keanu said with a slight smile. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just trying to make myself feel better about screwing up a job interview." She laughed. "Either way, this is turning out to be a pretty memorable trip." A voice came over the intercom announcing boarding for a flight to Phoenix. They both glanced up at the departure board, then back at each other. "Your flight's not for a while still, right?" Keanu asked. "About an hour now." "Why, I was thinking, are you hungry? There's a decent restaurant in Terminal 5. We could grab some food, keep talking." Rebecca's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Yeah, I mean, if you want to." "I'm enjoying this conversation. I don't want it to end just yet." "Okay, yes. Absolutely yes. But can I ask why? Not that I'm complaining, but you're Keanu Reeves. You could be doing literally anything right now. Why hang out with a random person you met in an airport?" Keanu thought about that. "Honestly? Because talking to you feels easy. Real. I spend a lot of time around people who want something from me. An autograph, a selfie, a role in a movie, access to other famous people. But you're not doing that. You're just talking to me like I'm a person. That's rare." "You are a person," Rebecca said. "A famous person, sure. But still a person. It seems weird that people forget that. You'd be surprised how often it happens." He stood up and offered his hand to help her up. "Come on, let's go get some food before your flight." She gathered her book and bag and they started walking toward the terminal exit. Dave fell into step behind them at a discreet distance. A few people noticed Keanu as they walked, and he could see phones coming out, people taking pictures from a distance. He was used to it. "Is this weird for you?" Rebecca asked quietly. "People staring?" "You get used to it. Mostly I just try to ignore it and focus on whatever I'm doing. I don't think I could handle it. Everyone watching all the time. It's the trade-off for getting to do work I love. Mostly it's worth it." He glanced at her. "Though right now it would be nice to just be two normal people getting food without anyone paying attention." They took the terminal train to Terminal 5, and the movement of the train made conversation difficult, so they stood in comfortable silence. Keanu found himself studying Rebecca's profile again. The resemblance to Jennifer was still there. but he was starting to see her as her own person more clearly now. She had her own mannerisms, her own way of expressing herself, her own story. When they got to the restaurant, it was moderately busy with the usual airport crowd. The hostess did a double take when she saw Keanu but remained professional. She led them to a corner booth that offered some privacy from the main dining area. "Thank you," Keanu said to her. They settled into the booth and picked up menus. Rebecca laughed. "I can't believe I'm having dinner with Keanu Reeves. This is insane. Just dinner with another person," he said. "Nothing insane about it. Easy for you to say. You didn't grow up watching Point Break 100 times. You liked Point Break? Are you kidding? I wanted to be a surfer for like 3 years after watching that movie. Never mind that I grew up in Portland where the water is freezing. I was convinced I was going to move to California and surf every day. Did you ever try it? Once on a trip to San Diego. I wiped out about 30 seconds after standing up and decided maybe surfing wasn't my calling." She grinned. "Turns out I'm much better at sitting in front of a computer making logos." A waiter came by and took their order. Keanu got a burger. Rebecca got a salad and fries. When the waiter left, Rebecca leaned forward on her elbows. "Okay, I have to ask. What's it like being in the Matrix? Like, how did you even prepare for that?" "A lot of training. Martial arts, wire work, learning to make it all look believable. It was physically the hardest thing I'd ever done at that point. But worth it, right? Those movies are legendary. Yeah, worth it. Though at the time, we had no idea if people would even like it. We were making this weird philosophical action movie about reality being a simulation. It could have bombed, but it didn't. It changed cinema. We got lucky," Keanu said. "Right place, right time, right story." They talked about movies for a while, then about Portland and what it was like living there. Rebecca told him about her small apartment near Hawthorne, her favorite coffee shops, the bookstore where she spent too much money. She made him laugh with stories about her cat, who apparently was part demon and part angel depending on the time of day. "I never had you pegged as a cat person," Keanu said. "I'm not, really, or I wasn't. But Princess Buttercup chose me and now I'm obsessed. Please tell me that's not actually your cat's name." "Okay, I won't tell you that." She grinned. "My niece named her. She was 6 at the time and very into The Princess Bride. The name stuck." Keanu stopped about 5 feet from where the woman sat. His mouth felt dry and his mind had gone completely blank. All the things he'd thought about saying suddenly seemed ridiculous. "How you look like someone I used to love? Excuse me, but seeing your face just brought back 24 years of grief?" Nothing sounded right. Nothing sounded normal. She must have sensed someone standing there because she looked up from her book. Her eyes met his, and for just a second, she had this confused expression like she was trying to figure out why a stranger was hovering near her seat. Then recognition hit her face and her eyes went wide. "Oh my God," she said, closing her book. "You're Keanu Reeves." He managed a small smile, though his heart was still racing. "Yeah, I am. Hi." She stood up quickly, almost knocking over her coffee in the process. She caught it just in time. "Wow, sorry, I loved you in John Wick, and The Matrix. And well, everything, really." She laughed, a little embarrassed. "I'm rambling, sorry." Up close, the resemblance was even more striking and somehow less exact at the same time. Her eyes were blue where Jennifer's had been hazel. Her smile was wider, more open. She was taller too, maybe 5'8" or 5'9", but something about the overall impression, the energy she gave off, still reminded him powerfully of the woman he'd lost. "Don't apologize," he said. His voice sounded more steady than he felt. "I'm the one who should apologize. I'm interrupting your reading. Are you kidding? This is amazing. My friends are never going to believe this." She seemed to catch herself and shook her head. "Sorry, that sounds so silly. You must get this all the time." "It's okay," he said. And it was. Her genuine enthusiasm was actually helping him relax a little. "What are you reading?" She held up the book so he could see the cover. It was a mystery novel. Something about a detective in the Pacific Northwest. It's pretty good. I grabbed it at one of the airport bookstores. I'm not great at flying, so reading helps me not think about it too much. "Where are you headed?" "Portland. I live there. I was just here for a few days visiting my brother." She tilted her head slightly. "Can I ask what brings you over here? Not that I'm complaining, but you looked kind of intense when you were walking up." This was it. The moment where he either told her the truth or made up some polite excuse and walked away. He could feel his heart hammering again. Dave was still watching from a distance, probably wondering what was taking so long. Keanu took a breath. "This is going to sound strange." "Okay," she said carefully. Her expression shifted from starstruck excitement to something more guarded. He realized she was probably thinking he was about to hit on her in some weird celebrity way. "You remind me of someone," he said quickly. "Someone who was very important to me. Someone I lost a long time ago. When I saw you at the coffee shop, I had to come over. I know how that sounds. I know it's weird." Her expression softened immediately. The guardedness melted away, replaced by something gentler. "Oh," she said quietly. "I'm sorry. For your loss, I mean." "Thank you." He rubbed the back of his neck, feeling awkward. "I don't usually do this. Approach strangers in airports. But the resemblance it's really striking." She studied his face for a moment, and he could see her processing what he'd said. "That must have been hard. Seeing me and thinking of them." "It was," he admitted. "It is, but I'm glad I came over. You seem like a nice person." "I try to be." She smiled, and it was such a warm, genuine smile that it made his chest ache. "What was her name?" "If you don't mind me asking." "Jennifer. That's a beautiful name." She paused. "People tell me all the time that I have one of those faces, you know? Like I look familiar even when they've never met me. I've been mistaken for other people before, but nobody's ever reacted the way you did. It must have been someone really special." "She was." The words came out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat. "We were going to start a family together. But things didn't work out that way. She died in a car accident in 2001. The woman's hand went to her heart. God, I'm so sorry. That's terrible." They stood there for a moment in silence. Around them, the airport continued its endless motion. Flights were called. People rushed past. Kids whined about being bored. But in their small bubble near Gate 37, time felt suspended. "I'm being pretty heavy for a random airport encounter," Keanu said, trying to lighten things a bit. "You were just trying to read your book and now you're dealing with my emotional baggage." "Hey, don't worry about it," she said. "Honestly, I think this is the most interesting conversation I've had in months. My life is pretty boring. Graphic design deadlines and Netflix binges. Meeting famous people and talking about lost love is way more exciting." "You're a graphic designer?" "Yeah, freelance mostly. Some web design, some branding work for small businesses. Nothing glamorous, but I like it." She picked up her coffee and took a careful sip. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you believe in coincidences? Like, real coincidences, or do you think things happen for a reason?" Keanu thought about that. It was a question he'd wrestled with for years, especially after losing Jennifer and Ava. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I used to think everything happened for a reason. But after what I went through, that got harder to believe. Because what reason could there be for good people dying young? What's the point of that?" She nodded slowly. "I lost my dad when I was 12. Heart attack. Just boom, gone one day, and everybody kept telling me it was God's plan or it happened for a reason. But I was 12. I didn't care about reasons. I just wanted my dad back." "I'm sorry," Keanu said. "That's way too young to lose a parent." "Thank you." She looked down at her coffee cup. "I think maybe things just happen sometimes. Random, terrible things. And we try to find meaning in them because the alternative is too scary. The idea that life is just chaos and we have no control." "That's pretty philosophical for an airport conversation," he said with a slight smile. She laughed. "Sorry, I think too much. My friends are always telling me I need to lighten up and just enjoy things without analyzing them to death. No, I get it. I'm the same way." He glanced at the departure board. "When's your flight?" "Not for another hour and a half. I always get here super early because of the anxiety thing." She gestured to the empty seats around her. "You want to sit? I mean, if you have time. You're probably busy. You probably have places to be." Keanu looked back at Dave, who raised his eyebrows in a silent question. Keanu held up his hand in a just a few more minutes gesture. Then he looked back at the woman. "You know what? I'd like that." They sat down, leaving one seat between them out of polite social distance. She set her book on the seat that separated them. For a moment, neither of them said anything. It was a comfortable silence, though not awkward. "I didn't introduce myself," she said suddenly. "I'm Rebecca. Rebecca Chen. Nice to meet you, Rebecca." He meant it. Despite the emotional whirlwind that had brought him over here, despite the grief that was still sitting heavy in his chest, he was genuinely glad to be sitting here talking with her. "This is so surreal," she said. "This morning I woke up in my brother's guest room, and tonight I'm going to tell all my friends I met Keanu Reeves at the airport and had a deep conversation about loss and coincidence. They'll think you're making it up," he said. "Oh, definitely, unless—" She pulled out her phone. "Would you mind if I got a photo? Just so I have proof?" "Sure." He was used to photo requests. They were part of the deal of being in the public eye. Rebecca held up her phone and they leaned closer together. She snapped a quick selfie, then looked at it and laughed. I looked terrified. "Hold on, let me try again." The second photo was better. They were both smiling and Rebecca looked genuinely happy. Keanu looked tired, but he always looked tired in photos these days. "Thank you," she said, putting her phone away. "Okay, so here's what I'm curious about. Do I really look that much like her? Like your Jennifer?"
Keanu studied her face carefully.
"The coloring is different, and some of the features, but yeah, the overall impression is very similar. Something about the shape of your face, the way you move. It's uncanny. That must be so strange for you." "It is, but also—" He paused, trying to find the right words. "I've spent a long time thinking about Jennifer, missing her, wishing things had been different. And I think maybe I needed this, to see someone who reminds me of her but isn't her. Does that make sense?" "I think so," Rebecca said. "Like a reminder that life goes on, that there are other people in the world, other stories. Something like that." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Can I tell you something? This might sound strange coming from someone you just met. After everything we've already talked about, I don't think anything you say could sound strange." "Fair point." She smiled. "Here's the thing. I think you came over here because you needed to. Not just because of how I look, but because you needed to talk to someone. You needed to say her name out loud to tell someone about her, even if that someone is a random stranger in an airport." Keanu felt something tighten in his throat. She was right. He had people in his life he could talk to, good friends, family, but he didn't talk about Jennifer much anymore. It had been years since he'd really opened up about her to anyone new. Every step toward the woman felt like walking through water. Keanu's mind was racing, jumping from one thought to another so fast he could barely keep track. What was he doing? This was insane. But his feet kept moving forward anyway, carrying him closer to the stranger who looked so much like the person he'd lost all those years ago. Memories were crashing over him in waves now, and he couldn't stop them even if he wanted to. He remembered the first time he saw Jennifer back in 1998. It was at a party for a producer friend of his. She'd been standing near the bar talking with some people from a record label. When she laughed, really laughed, her whole face lit up. He'd been drawn to her immediately, and somehow he'd worked up the courage to introduce himself. They'd clicked right away. She was funny and smart, with this way of seeing the world that was both practical and deeply creative. She worked in the film industry too, doing production work, and she understood the crazy hours and the pressure. But she also knew how to pull him away from all that, to help him remember there was more to life than the next movie or the next role. He remembered their first real date. He'd picked her up in his motorcycle and they'd driven up the coast. They stopped at this little seafood place in Malibu, nothing fancy, just picnic tables and paper plates. They'd talked for hours about everything and nothing. Movies, music, their childhoods, their dreams. By the end of that night, he was already falling in love. The memories of the good times hurt, but they weren't the ones that made his chest feel like it was being crushed. Those came next. December 1999. Jennifer was 8 months pregnant with their daughter. They'd already picked out a name. Ava. He'd spent weeks getting the nursery ready, painting the walls a soft yellow, assembling the crib, reading every book he could find about being a good father. He'd been nervous but excited, ready to start this new chapter of their lives. But Ava was stillborn. The doctors never gave them a clear reason why. Sometimes these things just happened, they said, which was the most useless thing anyone had ever told him. Jennifer had to go through labor knowing their baby was already gone. He'd held her hand through all of it, both of them crying, both of them lost in a grief so deep it felt like drowning. That loss had changed everything. They'd tried to stay together, tried to help each other heal, but grief does strange things to people. Sometimes it pulls you closer. Sometimes it pushes you apart. For a while they separated, both of them needing space to deal with the pain in their own ways. But they'd been finding their way back to each other. That's what made April 2, 2001 even worse. They'd been talking again, carefully rebuilding what they'd had. He'd started to hope that maybe they could heal together, that maybe they could find happiness again. Then came the phone call. Jennifer had been at a party at someone's house. She'd left early in the morning and her Jeep had crashed on Cahuenga Boulevard. The police said she wasn't wearing a seatbelt. She was thrown from the vehicle and died instantly. She was only 28 years old. Keanu had to stop walking for a moment. He was only a few feet from where the woman sat reading her book, but the memories had hit him so hard that he needed to catch his breath. A couple walking past gave him a curious look, probably wondering why this guy in a baseball cap was just standing in the middle of the terminal, looking like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. The funeral had been a blur. He remembered wearing sunglasses even though it was overcast. He remembered Jennifer's mother crying, her friends from the industry looking shell-shocked. He remembered feeling like none of it was real, like he'd wake up any moment and find out it was all a terrible dream. But he didn't wake up, because it wasn't a dream. The years after that had been dark. He'd thrown himself into work because working meant he didn't have to think. He did movie after movie, training and stunts and endless days on set. At night he'd ride his motorcycle for hours just driving through the empty streets of Los Angeles until the sun came up. His friends worried about him. His sisters worried about him. But he couldn't explain to them that he needed the pain, needed to feel something even if that something was exhausting and hollow. Slowly, very slowly, he'd learned to live with it. The grief never went away, but it became less sharp. He found purpose in his foundation work, helping kids with cancer. He made good friends, real friends, people who understood his need for quiet and privacy. He dated a few times over the years, though nothing serious. How could it be? How could anyone compare to what he'd lost? He'd thought he'd made peace with it, thought he'd accepted that some losses you just carry forever, like stones in your pocket, heavy but manageable. Then he walked into this airport and saw this woman, and suddenly all those stones felt like boulders. The woman turned a page in her book, completely unaware that someone was standing nearby having an entire emotional breakdown. She took a sip of her coffee, made a small face like it was too hot, and set it down again. Such ordinary human gestures, but each one hit Keanu with another wave of memory. Jennifer used to read like that, completely absorbed in whatever book she'd picked up. She'd get so into a story that he could call her name 3 times before she'd hear him. And she always ordered her coffee too hot, then complained about it, then did the exact same thing the next day. He thought about all the time he'd lost with Jennifer. The years they could have had together if things had been different. The life they could have built. Ava would have been 25 years old now. She might have looked like Jennifer. She might have had his dark hair or her mother's laugh. They'd never know. A gate agent's voice came over the intercom announcing boarding for a flight to Seattle. The woman at the window looked up from her book, checked something on her phone, then went back to reading. Not her flight, apparently. Keanu realized that Dave was standing a respectful distance away, keeping an eye on him but not interfering. Other people were starting to notice him now, too. He saw a young woman nudge her friend and point in his direction. A businessman walking past did a double take. He was used to this, the recognition, the stares. Usually he handled it well, staying polite and kind, but also protecting his privacy. But right now he didn't care about any of that. He thought about Jennifer's funeral again. He'd helped carry her casket. He remembered how heavy it was, how wrong it felt that someone so full of life could be reduced to something carried by 6 people. He remembered standing at the gravesite, staring at the casket, thinking that he should say something but not having any words. What do you say when the universe takes away everything you'd hoped for? He'd visited her grave many times over the years. In the beginning, he went every week. He'd sit on the grass and talk to her, tell her about his day, about the movies he was working on, about how much he missed her. Sometimes he'd cry. Sometimes he'd just sit in silence. After a while, the visits became less frequent. Not because he cared less, but because he'd learned that she wasn't really there. She was in his memories, in his heart, but not under that headstone. The last time he'd visited had been about 6 months ago, on what would have been her birthday. He'd brought flowers, like always, and spent an hour just sitting there, thinking about how different his life might have been. And now here he was, standing in an airport, staring at a woman who looked so much like Jennifer that it made his hands shake. The rational part of his brain was screaming at him to leave. This woman was a stranger. She had her own life, Her own story that had nothing to do with him or his past. It wasn't fair to project all his grief and loss onto her, just because of an accident of genetics that made her look like someone else. But the rest of him, the part that still ached for what he'd lost, couldn't let it go. He needed to know who she was. He needed to hear her voice to see if it was similar or completely different. He needed to understand why the universe had put this person in front of him today, of all days, in this airport, at this moment. Maybe it meant nothing. Probably it meant nothing. Life was full of random coincidences that felt significant but were just chaos pretending to be fate. Or maybe it meant something he couldn't understand yet. Keanu took a deep breath and started walking again. His heart was pounding and his palms were sweaty. He felt like a teenager working up courage to talk to his crush, not a grown man who'd lived through more pain than most people could imagine. The woman was still reading, still completely unaware of the emotional storm heading her way. In a few seconds, he'd be standing right in front of her, and he'd have to say something. He still had no idea what that would be. The afternoon sun was cutting through the tall windows of Los Angeles International Airport when Keanu Reeves walked through Terminal I. But he'd just gotten off a flight from New York, tired from 3 straight days of interviews and press events. His latest movie was doing well, but the promotional tour had worn him down. He wore his usual airport uniform, faded jeans, a dark jacket, and a black baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Most people didn't notice him, which was exactly how he liked it. He shifted his leather backpack on his shoulder and headed toward the exit. The airport was packed with the usual Monday afternoon crowd. Business travelers rushed past him. Families wrangled kids and luggage, and tourists stood in confused clusters staring at their phones. Keanu had walked through this airport hundreds of times over the years. He knew every terminal, every shortcut, every quiet corner where he could sit and wait without being bothered. But today was different. As he rounded the corner near Gate 42, something made him stop. Not something, someone. A woman was standing at a small coffee shop counter waiting for her order. She stood in profile, her face turned slightly away from him. The afternoon light coming through the windows lit up her features in a way that made his breath catch in his throat. For a moment, the entire airport seemed to go silent. He knew that face, or at least he thought he did. The shape of her cheekbones, the way her hair fell just past her shoulders, the gentle slope of her nose. Even the way she stood with her weight shifted to one hip, one hand resting in her jacket pocket. It was also familiar that his chest tightened. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. People continued to flow around him like he was a rock in a stream. Some bumped into him with quick apologies. Others shot him annoyed looks for standing in the middle of the walkway. But Keanu couldn't move. His feet felt glued to the polished airport floor. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. The woman reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. That simple gesture hit him like a punch. He'd seen that exact movement 1,000 times before, years ago. It was such a small thing, but it brought back a flood of memories so powerful that he had to remind himself to breathe. His mind went back to 2001, 24 years ago, though sometimes it felt like yesterday. The worst phone call of his life. The funeral where he could barely stand. The months and years after. Learning to live with a hole in his heart that never quite healed. Jennifer Syme had been the love of his life, and losing her in that car accident had nearly destroyed him. He'd worked hard to move forward. Therapy, work, friends, his foundation. He'd built a good life, found moments of happiness and peace. But the grief never really went away. It just changed shape, became something he carried with him always, like an old scar that ached when the weather changed. And now, standing in this airport, he was looking at a woman who could have been Jennifer's twin. The barista called out a name and handed the woman her coffee. She laughed at something the young man behind the counter said, a light, genuine sound that carried across the noise of the terminal. Keanu felt his hands start to shake. That laugh. It wasn't exactly the same, but it was close enough to make his vision blur for a second. He told himself to look away, to keep walking. This was just his tired mind playing tricks on him. He'd been working too hard, not sleeping enough. There were millions of people in the world. Some of them were bound to look like people we'd lost. It didn't mean anything, but he couldn't look away. The woman turned a bit more, giving him a better view of her face. She was younger than Jennifer would have been now, maybe in her early 30s. And as he looked more carefully, he could see the differences. Her eyes were a slightly different shape. Her chin was a little more pointed. But the overall impression, the way all her features came together, was so eerily similar that it made his skin prickle. A family with 3 kids rushed past him, and one of the children's rolling suitcases knocked into his leg. The father apologized quickly and kept moving. The small collision broke through some of Keanu's paralysis. He took a step to the side, closer to the wall, but his eyes never left the woman at the coffee shop. She was looking at her phone now, scrolling through something with a slight smile on her face. She wore simple clothes, jeans, and a white button-up shirt under a tan jacket. A canvas bag hung from her shoulder. She looked like any other traveler, just someone passing through on their way to somewhere else. Keanu's security guy, Dave, had been walking a few paces behind him. Now Dave came up beside him, concern on his face. "You okay, boss?" he asked quietly. Keanu opened his mouth, but no words came out at first. He swallowed hard and tried again. "Yeah," he managed, though his voice sounded strange to his own ears. "Yeah, I'm fine." Dave followed his gaze to the woman at the coffee shop. "You know her?" "No," Keanu said. Then more honestly, "I don't know. I thought, she looks like someone I used to know." Dave nodded slowly. He'd worked with Keanu for years and knew when to push and when to stay quiet. This was clearly a stay quiet moment. "Want to head to the car? I can grab it and meet you at the curb." Keanu knew that was the smart move, the logical thing to do. Leave now, get in the car, go home. Try to forget about this strange moment. In a few hours it would just be a weird story. The kind of thing that happens sometimes, in a city as big as Los Angeles, but something in him couldn't let it go. "Give me a minute," he said to Dave. The woman picked up her coffee and started to walk away from the counter. She was heading in the opposite direction, toward a different gate. In a few seconds, she'd disappear into the crowd and Keanu would never see her again. He made a decision. His legs felt unsteady as he started walking, following her at a distance. He had no idea what he was going to do or say. This was crazy. He knew it was crazy. But something deeper than logic was pulling him forward. He'd spent the last 24 years living with regret and what-ifs. What if he'd called Jennifer that night? What if he'd been there? What if things had been different? This wasn't Jennifer. He knew that. But maybe the universe was giving him a chance at something. He didn't know what exactly. An answer, closure, just a closer look at this impossible resemblance? The woman stopped at gate 37 and sat down in one of the seats near the window. She set her coffee on the seat beside her and pulled out a book from her bag. The afternoon light caught her face again, and Keanu had to steady himself against a nearby pillar. A few other travelers recognized him now. A couple of teenagers whispered and pulled out their phones. An older woman smiled and gave him a small wave. He usually tried to be gracious with fans, but right now he barely noticed them. His entire focus was on the woman reading her book 20 feet away. What was he supposed to do now? Walk up to a complete stranger and tell her she looked like his dead girlfriend? That would go over well. She'd probably think he was using some weird pickup line or that he was having a breakdown. Maybe he was having a breakdown, but as he stood there watching her turn pages, he knew he couldn't just walk away. Not without trying something. He'd spent too many years wondering what if. He couldn't add this moment to that list. Keanu took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders and started walking toward her.